walk. There, right here, over by Kelly. There we go.
Your destination is on the left.
I was looking for an opportunity to build a modest house, and alley houses are kind of the final frontier for new construction in DC for a city that's essentially built out.
Hi, Jack. Hi.
He's the guy I bought the lot from, and he owns the lot that we're standing on right now.
Oh, really? So you wanted an alley to make it, you were specifically looking for an alley?
Yeah, I was cold calling property owners of vacant alley lots, and I came across this alley lot that had been a vacant patch of gravel and grass, just like some of the other alley lots in this block. And the property owner owned an additional alley lot that is where those cars are parked. This is Adolfo coming towards us. So I worked out an arrangement with Adolfo that involved me being his architect for free in exchange for him selling us the lot for a price we could afford. But we can wait till the helicopters pass.
Are those common in DC area?
Unfortunately, you know, we're in Capitol Hill, so it's kind of in the middle of everything. So to the extent that very important people need helicopter service, like this is a common neighborhood for it to be traveling over.
Is this an area with a lot of alleys?
All the old neighborhoods of DC have alleyways. It's kind of a typical feature of the DC urban plan. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, alley housing was pretty ubiquitous in DC. It was largely self-built housing. That tradition responded to the have-nots of the city and those who either couldn't afford to build their own house or because of rampant discrimination couldn't rent in the formal housing opportunities of DC. So alleyways became the release valve for all of that demographic pressure. Most of that housing was self-built. It was largely wooden housing and didn't have access to water and sewer. And so not that long after that period of rapid growth of alley housing, the federal government and various citizens groups started rallying this effort to remove the alley houses, to reform the building code and what was the beginnings of the zoning code to prohibit alley houses and to remove them essentially. So the zoning code for most of the 20th century had prohibited alley construction, and that moratorium was lifted relatively recently, and it kind of unlocked this potential for new alley houses.
You are showing a way of staying in a place that is very expensive.
Correct. The kind of dimension of alley space is highly variable, and so this main north-south axis is 15 feet in width. This is 10 feet in width. You get to the middle, it's 30 feet in width. It's kind of idiosyncratic, but it was also planned in the era before the automobile, when these alleyways were mainly servicing horse stables. There was an ice factory over here, warehouses. And in these alleys, you have things like parking lots and trash pickup, and it's kind of the bowels, if you will, of the city. I think it's more charming than that, but functionally, that's kind of how it was designed.
So there was what'd you say, ice factory?
Yeah, there was an ice factory on this lot, and this parking area here had been a collection of alley houses, brick alley houses that were torn down in the mid-20th century. And these, unlike a lot of alley houses in DC, did have water and sewer. So
should we step into this, or where's there a door? I mean, obviously a door somewhere. I just can't figure out where.
Well, that's kind of the idea. I didn't want it to be too conspicuous.
Your house goes right to the street.
Yes, this is the front door. It's, I guess, inconspicuous. This is the front porch. And yeah, it's so that you can just make sure that you're not going to get hit by a car. Among other things, that's not necessarily a threat every day, but it could be. So it wouldn't have been the safest thing to have a door that kind of like exists on this plane here. There's actually two doors here. This is actually a self-contained suite. And it's otherwise day-to-day a library for us, but yeah, when we're hosting relatives and friends or could use some support with our mortgage, this is an Airbnb suite. And there's
How big?
I couldn't tell you the square footage. It's maybe 18 feet by 12 feet, 300 square feet or something. And then this pulls out to be, a little bed. And so if someone wanted to convert it back to a sofa and have this be a kind of more open space when they're staying here. There's this 4-foot margin that exists between this wall and the property line, and that margin is occupied by things like bathrooms and porches and stairways. Where windows exist on this ground floor, they're kind of clerestory height, at least 5'8", 6 feet above the ground, so they're bringing in a lot of light, but you don't feel like you're on display because there's not really a buffer between the building and car traffic and bike traffic and everyone using the alley. We generally like to avoid drywall where possible, and in this case, there's a limited use of drywall against this exposure on the east side because we're on the property line here. So there's another building on the other side, and this needs to be a rated wall. So we use sheetrock here in a limited way, but it's also coated in something called spray cork, mostly cork granules with a little bit of binder and pigment, and it gives a little bit of thermal value as well as it tends to muffle the noise a little bit.
And then you have like a small kitchen.
Yeah, kitchen is a very generous term, but more like a coffee station. There's a little mini fridge. It's, a place to heat up leftovers.
And this is connected to your home?
Yeah, I mean, this is an intervening door that it can be locked on this side. Okay. And at one point we talked about doing kind of like a, like a secret bookcase, hidden door, but it got too expensive and involved and, kind of stupid. This is really the main and only gathering kind of public space of the house. So this is a living room, kitchen, dining room. We decided if we wanted to have some really generous ceiling height, because the zoning code limits you to 20 feet for an alley house, it would require us digging down.
So this is a couple feet underground.
Yeah, if you look at this wall, the concrete foundation stops here. The alley elevation is like right here.
So we are really close to the alley at the same time, but also you have some space here to just hang out.
It's not a huge house. It's something like 1,600 square feet, and you saw the den Airbnb suite. So a lot of the time, this is the beginning and end of the common area of the house. So it needed to be very multifunctional, and we thought the more gracious ceiling height made it a more comfortable space to spend a lot of time in, and these high clerestory windows bring in a lot of light, especially in the afternoon. You never feel like you're on display. That's a real challenge in these kinds of sites where you're literally next to an alley that has no buffer. And if we wanted a buffer, it would have meant this wall getting set into like here so that we could have, say, a fenced-in garden along the western facade, but then you have a much less manageable footprint for bathrooms and bedrooms and stairways and stuff. What you see here is structural material. The core is structural grade plywood, but then the outer layers are 1/8-inch thick laminated bamboo fiber. So it's part of the structural layup, but it's like a stud-free wall type. All of the openings, all the cuts, all the dimensioning is done on a CNC table. I'd call it almost like a high-tech Sears house, to the extent that like old school Sears houses came on a flatbed truck in palletized form and everything was numbered, and what you see is what you get. And so you didn't need to be an expert of fancy trade work. All you really need is a nail gun and a couple guys. None of the panels are going to be more than 120 pounds. So it's really one or two people stabilizing the panel as the other person is nail gunning it together. The panels are cut, all the grooves are in place so that they can kind of kiss each other properly. There's color-coded dots that indicate where a nail needs to go. And then there's numbered lettering so that you know if it's an exterior panel or an interior panel, and it's all sequential. And so it's kind of a color by numbers.
Can you show me a juncture between two panels?
I mean, they did a good job if you don't notice it, but this is a juncture here.
Okay.
There's wood filler in it that's stainable, so ideally it isn't something that's too conspicuous.
And then when we see these holes,
Those are plugs that cover what had been an access port for the electrician to run his wire. Okay. So above any kind of junction box or switch plate, you're going to see these holes, and then near the top of the wall, you'll typically see a larger hole, and that's for the hose of spray insulation to go in. So this is all fully insulated with dense pack cellulose. So yeah, I mean, it's like, I guess you could call it a galley kitchen in the sense that it's just a linear kitchen. We have an induction cooktop and sink. It's all in this one, something like 18-foot line. And the countertops are all a super high density cork. So there's like a full gradient of cork applications, from cork spray to cork countertops, cork flooring. Cork is acoustical insulation, cork is exterior cladding. So it's kind of like a love note to cork.
this is waterproof because it has a varnish.
Yeah, we coated it with a water-based sealant. Cork does have like some natural hydrophobic characteristics. That's why it's a useful wine stopper. And this is cork in an unadulterated state. It's like a burr on a cork tree. Yeah, the cork countertop is kind of cool because, like, unlike a stone countertop or something, like you drop a glass something on it, if it were a slate countertop, you'd be out of luck. But it's just like a nice insurance policy when you're handling china or glass. Like, you never feel like you're gonna have a problem.
That sound is...
Yeah, I'm not an expert or anything, but having had crowds of people here, I've overheard people talking about how it's comfortable to talk in here.
But have they been? I know I've heard so much about these recently. Like,
He's great.
Because say in a painted drywall environment with stone countertops and a lot of tile, like, it's just a very different comfort level. Due to the interior partition, you have an available cavity for things like pocket doors. This was so that we could tie this space off acoustically from the stair hall, but also if we needed our dog, if he needs his own space and needs to be separated from the rest of the house. Because this is as much like our house as our dog's house. He's a 185-pound Mastiff, and he's very slobbery and very naughty. There's a little pantry. It's a very tall space, but a very small space. And so we have a very open style kitchen, open shelving, not too many cabinets. And part of the reason it could be like this is because all of our grains and canned beans and all that stuff gets to live in here. And it's tall enough that it made sense to have a kind of permanent ladder. And these are actually monkey bars that I found on like a playground site, because it's hard to find rungs.
What's that up there? Yeah, you have to go up and get some coffee and...
Yeah, or toilet paper, or tablecloths, or things that we don't use all that much. I'll come up here, but I'm not that tall, so it was important. Neither is my wife.
No, I love the way the light plays on these stairs.
A lot of the attitude of this house is bringing in daylight without feeling like you're on display, which is like an ongoing battle in an alley setting like this. So on the facade, this was just all vertical siding in this middle section of the house. So yeah, all the light is coming from a skylight, and we have this stair. We designed this railing to be more or less a platform for houseplants. At one point, we had talked about, instead of some of this being for plants, so you could have a little desk here. But yeah, for now it's like a beautiful place for plants to thrive because it gets all this light coming through the skylight. It was kind of a way to take advantage of all of this ambient light through the skylight. This is our bedroom suite. There's an ensuite bathroom. This is the bedroom. It also functions as my wife's work from home office.
Here you see that you're in the center of the alley networks.
Yeah, it's kind of the cockpit. It's not like primetime viewing necessarily, but yeah, the comings and goings, you're kind of in a front row seat here. Like you saw from the outside, some of the facade recesses to create these outdoor porches. And this is an entirely covered porch. So like someday we might screen this in. Okay. This is on axis with what becomes a street on the block due south of here.
It's nice back here though. You just hear birds and.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, the alley is cool for that reason. It's almost like a city within the city. You know, unless you had a reason to be back here to take out your trash, or if you were on a bike, there isn't a huge reason to be driving through as a car goes by. So that's a car that relates to the warehouses that we're both across from and next to. So on the other side of this wall here is a warehouse. And that warehouse stores scaffolding for a drywalling company. They've had these warehouses since the 1960s. I think some of these had dwellings in them. This alley, unlike most alleys in DC, has water and sewer in it. So we were able to tie in directly at our frontage, part because this alley had alley homes in it up until the mid-20th century. And those alley homes had toilets and kitchens and things that use the utility system. And what is this 4-foot margin here for the porch? Then, like in that kitchen area, we reclaim for part of this bathroom. That room ends more or less here. And by reclaiming this, what would otherwise be a porch, and putting these clerestory windows, we could have a more gracious bathroom with a couple sinks and a little toilet area. And there's like a little baby sauna back here too. There's enough space above it that we could have little storage for our luggage and stuff. So we really were trying to make use of every inch. And then there's just a little shower stall here. That wall that I was showing downstairs, that's where all the utilities in the house come in. And once we're up here, the thickness of that wall is no longer so critical for circulating, water and sewer and the fire service. So we could take space out of the wall. And this is essentially a big niche. The full width of this shower stall is a recess. If it were a conventionally framed wall with just studs, you would never create a big opening and just leave a half-inch of drywall between you and a stair hall. But here, it's a beefy structural grade panel, so you can get away with stuff like that.
Nice.
So here there's a hall bathroom that has this expansive glass block as another kind of clerestory feature. This is borrowing light from the hallway. We knew that we wouldn't have an exterior wall around this, but it feels like at a minimum you should have some kind of relationship to the changing light throughout the day. So when you're in here, you still have some connection to daylight. This is a guest room and it's my office.
Every part is a different part of the alley. Like here you have this huge tree. And
Yeah, a lot changes from beginning to end. So the stairs they're galvanized grate metal so that you get a good amount of dappled light that goes through them. They're also just a very simple way to build a stair, especially on the outside of a house. So if you had come like a couple weeks ago, these would all be full of broccoli, but we recently finally ate all of the broccoli. And so these have since been planted with squash and little melons, cantaloupes. Oh yeah. You see, look at this little baby.
oh yeah.
Yeah, these are like little fingerling eggplants, so they won't get huge, but they'll get a little bigger. And these are strawberries, and these are green beans, but they're purple until you cook them.
This is really taking advantage of this space. I mean, you're getting quite a bit of growing space up here, right?
We really are. You can see these little guys. This is essentially like a very utilitarian space to the extent that we really wanted to have a vegetable garden that could give us food. The actual organization of these prefab planter beds was in the interest of yield and maximizing what we could grow up here. Those are beets. Look at these guys.
Oh,
yeah, we need to eat them this week because they're like ready to go. They're very sweet though. We've been making all kinds of meals out of them. So you can see the site's very limited in footprint for outdoor spaces. So it was really important to have a space like this.
You're so connected to the whole area around you. You're above houses.
It was an unexpected type of space once we got up here, and because you're kind of in the courtyard of the larger block and you have a very unique relationship to all the existing homes on the block. You definitely feel very connected to the block and the neighborhood when you're in a space like this, because we're kind of occupying the donut hole of the block.
So we're right in the middle of an alley, or there's two alleys, a cross section of alleys?
I mean, I would call this a network of alleys that make up an alleyway, and there are a lot of tentacles to it. It kind of tapers to 10 feet or 15 feet. It wends and winds. It goes out. It has mouths, so to speak, onto every street around the block. And that's to enable trash collection, getting your horse out of the block like 120 years ago or whatever. But this is like the closest to the dead center of the block that you can really get to.
And so you just see all the history around us here.
In the late 19th century, this part of Capitol Hill was kind of an edge condition where you had, the federal city, monumental city, and then as you got this far away from the center of power in these alleyscapes. Together they kind of made their own city, the city of the alleyways. And today it's really just where the alley's kind of reclaimed in different ways. But it is quiet. And that's one of the really nice things about living back here is you don't have a bus line and cars speeding, and that stuff's not that far away, but far enough away that it feels very different from other places we've lived in the city.